For our last talk before lunch, we're going to have Dan Olsen. Dan Olsen is the author of the Lean Product Playbook. If you've gone to any of the Lean product meetups here in San Francisco or in the Valley, you've probably seen him speak. We're going to have him come up here and talk specifically about metrics and analytics. So welcome, Dan. I stole that from you.
Yeah, thanks. Great, thanks a lot, Rich, and thanks UserVoice for throwing an awesome conference. Super excited to be here for the first BASiS conference. There's not enough good product management conferences, so it's super exciting to be here. And what I'm going to talk with you guys today about is how to use analytics to optimize your business and product. Real quick about my background so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I started out with an engineering background, and then I moved out here a while ago, I won't say exactly how long ago, to get an MBA. And that's when I learned about product management. I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. That sounds amazing. And I asked people, where's the best place to go learn product management? And they said Intuit. So I went to Intuit and worked there. And as soon as I started working in product management, I realized how important user experience design is. And so I went and took some classes to learn about that. And I've always been kind of technical as well. So I actually started my career out of college doing submarine design. Which is, in hindsight, just very, very technical product management. It was a great job. And as I mentioned, I worked at Intuit. After Intuit, I pretty much started working at startups. I stumbled into being a consultant for startups as an interim VP of product. Finally had my own idea for a startup called Your Version, which was personalized news startup. Did that for a while, and then I returned to consulting, which is what I do now. And some of my clients are Box, Facebook, Microsoft. And as Rich mentioned, I also run a meetup group down in Palo Alto with over 5,500 product managers. We bring in top speakers, like the kind of speakers you guys have here. So if you're interested, you can definitely learn more. And I post all my slides at dan-olsen.com. So one thing, how many product managers do we have here? I'm sure we have a lot, right? Pretty much all product managers. All right, keep your hand up if you know the secret PM motto. You know the secret PM motto? No? OK. I learned it several years ago, so I just, I want to share. You guys know Spider-Man, though, right? Do you guys know his motto? Anybody? With great power comes great responsibility. That's right. So the PM motto is similar, but it's a little different. It's basically, with great responsibility comes no power. And we laugh because it's funny, but also a little sad, right? It's a little sad. But anyway, what are we responsible for? At the end of the day, we're responsible for a lot of things, but we're responsible for product market fit, achieving product market fit. And product market fit is one of these buzzwords, right? Anytime you have a whole big movement like Lean Startup, you have buzzwords like MVP and Pivot, and people have debates about what they mean. Product market fit is a little different. It was coined by Mark Andreessen back in 2007, and it got popular with Eric Ries and the Lean Startup. But the way people talk about it is pretty simplistic online. They'll be like, oh, Box succeeded because they had product market fit. Startup Y, sadly, they failed because they did not have product market fit. It's like this Boolean true, false state of existence. There isn't a lot of guidance on how to actually know if you have it and how to achieve it. And so that's why after working with so many different product teams as a PM myself and as a consultant, I kind of saw this meta pattern and put together a framework for how to achieve product market fit. And that's what I cover in my book, The Lean Product Playbook. I'm excited to give a couple copies away today. If you want to put your hat in the ring for a copy, just tweet if you want, just at Dan Olsen, and then I'll pick like one of the best tweets and one random tweet, basically. So, and if you want to throw a hashtag on it, that's great. But the book, in covering product market fit, it has some qualitative techniques. A lot of it early on when you're going from an idea to your MVP, a lot of it is qualitative. But then after you've kind of got your MVP out there, it switches more to quantitative. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today is analytics and how to basically use analytics to achieve product market fit. And then once you get to a high enough level of product market fit, how to actually optimize your business. And the process that I talk about in my book is basically the lean product analytic process. And I try to provide a step-by-step process that anybody can follow for their business. And it all starts with basically figuring out what are our metrics, right? And there's basically like a metrics maturity model. And your organization may be well beyond this, and we know what they are. It's all about optimizing. But in the beginning, you need to figure out what are my metrics. The next thing you want to do, step 2, is figure out what are the baseline values. Where are we at today with these metrics? And then from there, you want to look across your metrics and evaluate, okay, out of these metrics, which one do I think is going to offer the biggest upside potential, the highest ROI to really move the needle in our business? And this is all happening at the global product or business level, right? You're looking across all your metrics. At some point, you say, okay, we're going to focus on this one because we think it has the highest ROI. And then you select your top metric, and you go into a metric-specific optimization loop, where you're basically, as a team saying, great, we want to improve this metric. Let's brainstorm all the different ways that we can improve it. Let's figure out the one that we think is the highest ROI. Let's design it, implement it, and launch it. And then you hope that the metric goes up and to the right. But even if it doesn't, you've gained value because you've learned, basically, right? You've learned by going through that loop. And so that's basically the lean analytic process. I'm going to share some advice with you and then close out with a real case study where I applied this, and you can see the results, basically. And then, the last thing I forgot is at some point when you're optimizing that metric, you realize, okay, we've kind of hit all the things that we can do. It's getting harder and harder to improve it. You jump back and go back to your other metrics and say, okay, it's time to focus on another metric because that offers the highest ROI. And it can be helpful to have a high-level framework just to get started, to get your head around what are all the different metrics that we might be able to focus on, because there's actually a lot. Some people get overwhelmed with all the different analytics that they've got. Some people have no analytics data. Other people are like swimming in it and don't know how to make sense of it. So one of my favorite frameworks at a high level is from Dave McClure, his startup metric for Pirates called AAARRR, AAARRR. And I'll walk you through it. It's great. The cool thing about it is it applies to any business, right? That's the cool thing about this framework. It starts out with the first A is acquisition. Acquisition means how do we get people that don't know about our product, how do we get them to basically come to our website or our landing page to potentially get converted, right? So it's how do we get prospects to come visit us. The second A is activation, right? Great. Well, now that they've come to our website, or a place where we can convert them, what percentage are we actually activating and converting from prospects to customers? Once they convert to customers, then they're basically using your product. And what the third metric is retention. And you want to hopefully those, after they become customers, they stay active over time and then continue to use your product. And then those people, your users, can basically do the next one, which is referral. Right? They can tell their friend, hey, you got to check this out, either word of mouth or viral through like social products, right? And then that helps basically from your existing users get you new prospects. And then the last one is revenue. Last but not least is, okay, somehow by virtue of those customers using your product, you're generating revenue, either because they're paying you directly themselves or because you're generating revenue some other way. And so again, this is that's why it says R. Personally, I'd call activation conversion, but then it would be AAARRR. It wouldn't quite work as well as R. But the whole point here is to figure out which of these 5 areas offers the biggest ROI and the biggest improvement for my business and my product where we are today. And so you want to focus on the right metric at the right time. And I call that the metric that matters most, right? And you may not have perfect information, but the idea is based on what you know, which metric do you think is going to move the needle the most for your business? And as just like a quick hypothetical, let's say you're building a new product. It's a relatively new product. And let's narrow it down to 3, acquisition, conversion, retention. Who would focus on acquisition first if you had a new product and you're trying to achieve product market fit? A few hands. Who would focus on conversion? Who would focus on retention? Who didn't vote? A lot of people didn't vote. That's cool. All right. Well, it looks like retention had more there. But it's an interesting thing. And in general, you guys have probably heard, I don't have the slides here because it's a shorter talk, but like the leaky bucket syndrome. Basically, you have a bucket full of water, and the water is the number of customers you have. And every customer base is leaky. You're going to lose a certain amount no matter what. And the question is, how leaky is your bucket? That's retention, right? And basically, if you have a very leaky bucket, spending a lot of money on acquisition doesn't make a lot of sense because you're going to go spend all this money to get more water in there and it's just going to fall out over time, right? So in general, people start with retention, then go to conversion, and then go to acquisition so they get the biggest bang for their buck when they spend money on acquisition. So, and then I like to pose, again, back to the context of product market fit, there are a lot of metrics we could try to track and optimize, but I like to pose a question, if you're trying to measure how you're doing on product market fit, what's the one metric that you would focus on? What do you guys think you would focus on? Speak up loud because there's a fan over here. Engagement, okay. Lifetime value, LTV, all right, good. What else? Anybody else? What's that? Customer needs. Referral, net promoter score. Okay, cool. Great, yeah. And it's interesting, I often get NPS as one, and in my book I talk about, and other talks talk about the difference in behavioral analytics, behavioral and attitudinal. So NPS is like, would you recommend it? It's like, yes, I would, but it's not attitudinal. So there's no right answer, obviously, but for me, the one that really helps you really understand what's going on with product market fit is retention rate. And this is instead of being attitudinal like NPS, it's behavioral, because it actually tracks what percentage of your customers are coming back over time. And if you've got product market fit, You may be able to write an amazing landing page and get people to sign up because you're selling them an awesome snake oil, and then they get in, they're like, this product doesn't meet my needs. They're not going to come back. But if they come back, then it's evidence that you've met their needs, and they're coming back to do it again and again. And some of you may be familiar with retention curves. I just want to explain them real quick. Retention curves, basically, on the y-axis, they measure what percentage of users that signed up come back, basically. What percentage of customers come back over time. And so time is on the horizontal axis. It can be days, weeks, whatever time frame you want. And the first thing you see is obviously you lose over, that's your leaky bucket. You're losing people over time. Water's coming out of your bucket over time. The first thing you notice is 80% of people, the curve this axis doesn't even start at 100%. It starts at 20 to 25%. Because 80% of people never come back after the first use. This is actually from a real mobile app. Mobile is brutal. There's a reason, if you install an app, it's like, hey, check out this app. You're going to play for a minute, put it in your pocket. Are you going to go to screen 12 on your iPhone and remember that and launch it? You're not. That's why when you install, like, hey, can I please do push notifications? Please let me do push notifications, because they don't want you to forget about it. So mobile is brutal. So you're going to, no matter what it is, you're going to have some initial drop-off of people that just never come back because it didn't meet their needs or because they forget about it. And then it drops off. And then at the end, I've shown it here as flattening out, and that's nice if it does that, but in a lot of new products, it actually goes to 0. So sadly, all the water, all those customers leak out of the bucket. It's just a question of when, or you can get to a point where it's flat. And when you launch a new product, you can kind of use this curve. At some point, though, if you've been around for 6, 12 months, you don't want to lump all your customers into one bucket, and you want to start segmenting them and looking at them, right? And that's where cohort analysis comes in, basically. Cohort analysis, a cohort just means a subset of users. The most common way of dividing them up is by when they signed up. Like, oh, these guys signed up in January, these guys signed up in February, March. It doesn't have to be that. It could be by sales channel or acquisition channel, by some other segmentation criteria. But let me just run this by you guys, because the human brain actually knows a lot about retention rate intrinsically. Let's just do this. So here are 3 cohort curves. We have the percentage of users returning, and now a number of weeks since sign up, right? We have cohort A, blue diamonds, cohort B, red squares, cohort C, green triangles. And I need a lot more audience participation than we had before. Real quick, okay? I'm going to give you a bad net promoter score. All right. So who would want cohort A to be their cohort? Raise your hand. Who would want cohort B to be their cohort? Raise your hand. Who would want cohort C to be their cohort? Did you guys have a secret meeting beforehand? Did you say, hey, Dan, we'll put the slide up, we're all going to say that. So it's interesting, right? Basically, almost 0 or just a few people. Why is that? I mean, come on, guys, look at cohort A. It starts out at 50%, starts out strong. Why is it that C is better? For those of you that voted for C, why do you prefer that one? More stable at the end, long term, right? What really matters, all this is just noise. What really matters is, where does this thing flatten out, right? How much of that water do I hold on in my bucket at the end of the day, right? That's what really matters. And see, we didn't talk about it, but your brain knows that is it, right? And a lot of my book is qualitative. When you're doing a new product, you're talking, doing user interviews and talking to groups of 5 or 8. And the quants go, that's not statistically significant. You can't do that. What are you talking about, right? And some people long for a way to prove you have product market fit. Well, this is for you guys. Oops, let me go back. Where your curve is, where this ends up, that number, whether it's 12% or 5 or 3, that is a quantitative measure of product market fit, wherever that terminal asymptote value is, basically. And what you want to do is have your curves move up over time. Obviously, let's say we launched our product, our awful MVP 2 years ago, 24 months ago, and that's the curve that we saw. And in the next 6 months, we listened to a lot of customer feedback. We got better understanding our customers. We understood how our product didn't meet their needs. We fixed bugs. We fixed UX issues, right? And hopefully, when we look at the retention curve of people that signed up 6 months later, it's higher, right? And now we've moved that terminal value, terminal retention rate value. Then hopefully in the next 6 months, we do the same thing again and it moves up, basically. That's what I'm trying to say, is where that curve is product market fit, and you want it to improve over time, basically. And so the net takeaway is, if you're not measuring retention rate, you should be, right? If you really want to know how you're doing on product market fit. These other things like sales and LTV and things like that, they're important. But at the end of the day, if you want to know how leaky your bucket is, and make sure it's not too leaky. And I want to share some real world evidence with you guys that supports this. This is data from the Android App Store. And what they did is the retention curves. And now the cohorts are by how successful the apps are. So the first group in red here, that retention curve is for the top 10 apps on the App Store. and then the next 50, and then the next 100, and then the next 5,000. You see that? Right? The best apps are the ones that have the highest terminal value or retention rate, basically. Now, at some point, once you've got a high enough level of product market fit, you're feeling good, then you want to start optimizing your business, right? You want to start saying, great, we're holding on to people. How can we really optimize, conversion rate and how much money we're making and things like that? And at this point now, you need to go beyond Dave McClure's framework, which is great because it applies to every business, but now get into the specifics of your business, right? And so to optimize it. And the tool that I recommend there is what I call the equation of your business. As an ex-engineer, if I want to optimize something, I'd like to be able to express it quantitatively as an equation, right? And you may be saying, well, great, I don't know what equation to use. You can always start for any business with profit equals revenue minus cost, right? And that's not actionable. Obviously, it's like, hey, yeah, we want to grow revenue. It's like, that's not actionable at the like Scrum team or PM level. But what we're going to do is for our business, break it down like a formula, break it down so that it gets actionable. And the particular example, you can do it for any business model. I'm just going to do it for an advertising business model and break it down. So and in general, for tech companies, the marginal revenue is what matters the most because the marginal cost goes down over time. There are some cases where you need to focus on cost. But in general, we're breaking down revenue. So how would we break down revenue? And by the way, this is for a certain time period, like a month or a week or a year, right, that we're talking about. So we can break down for an ad business. It's all about visitors coming to your site and how much ad revenue you make per visitor, right? And this general idea of number of users times average revenue per user, or ARPU, that happens again and again. The next thing then is, great, ad revenue per user, that's still kind of high level. How can we break that down? Well, we get paid per impression, actually, right? So it's how many impressions did each visitor have times some effective CPM for the ads, and because CPM has a 1,000 factor in there, that's it. So we could write this all out longhand, that's what I'm trying to say, and we know, hey, if I change that metric, here's the impact it's going to have. Well, impressions per visitor, can we break that down further? We actually can. We can express it as, well, how many, during that time frame, how many times did each visitor visit? Did they come 3 times in the month or 5 times in the month? Each visit that they came, how many page views did they generate on average? Was it 3 or 4 or 5? And then how many impressions per page view did they generate? And so we've gone from a high level revenue now to very granular things. Like if we want to improve visits per visitor, how might we do that? For an ad site. Do you guys ever get emails saying, hey, check out these articles. We think you're going to like these articles. They make you click and go back to the site. That's how you increase visits per visitor, right? Page views per visit, how do you do that? You ever go to those annoying sites that spread the news article across 10 pages? Why are they doing that? They're trying to play with that dial right there, right? And impressions per page view, that's pretty easy to slap more ads per page. So that's very actionable, right? Let's go back to unique visitors. It's almost always beneficial to break down new versus returning. New, who signed up in this current time period, and who returning, who was a customer or visitor from a previous time period, right? I can show you 2 growth curves that look like this, and they look the same, but one has like amazing like new user acquisition and a really leaky bucket, but that's the net effect, and the other one has a lot less growth but much better retention. Which one do you have? The one with better retention. So it's really important to look at returning visitors. And let's say, for example, for new visitors, we had some kind of like viral loop or invitation thing. We could break it down into the invited visitors versus the ones that just showed up organically. And then for invited, we could break it down and do like a viral loop of, well, how many of our users were sending invites to people, how many were they sending, and what was the conversion rate. So you can see we've gone from a high-level revenue and broke it down now to things. And now this is where it's like, okay, you as a team, we've identified our metrics. Which one of these, you can have the debate on your team. Should we be focusing on visits per visitor or invited visitors, or what should we be focused on, right? And then you want to track where you're at and how you're doing. This is some real data for a registration page conversion rate. So what percentage of people that went to the page signed up? And this is what I call a ratio metric, real quick, right? If your CEO came to you and said, hey, how's the registration page doing? And you said, it's great. We got 200 signups yesterday. And he came back the next day. It's like, it's even better. We got 1,000 signups today. It's like, why? Well, maybe you just got covered on TechCrunch. So those absolute metrics aren't as powerful as ratio metrics, where you take the number of people that signed up and divide it by how many came to the page. And those are easier to compare apples to apples over time. So this is a ratio metric. This is 9 months of data, daily data points. And the biggest thing you see right away is like there's a huge variation in this conversion rate, like a 3x variation. But every single change that's there was something we did either on purpose or by accident. So we started out tracking our baseline. It was around 35%. We weren't too happy with that. By the way, this product, it was a free product. You could register for it if you wanted to, but you could also use it without registering. Like you just show up and use this product. Or you could register. And what we did is we started changing the messaging on why you should register. Like, what features are you going to get that you don't have by not being registered? And we changed the messaging, and we saw it shut up. And then here, I basically did a lot of usability testing, found out where were people getting tripped up on the form fields, improve usability, validation, things like that, cleaning up the UX. And we had this nice steady improvement, up to almost 65%. Then marketing came along and said, look at this registration page with all this white space. We got to put some demographic questions on there. Let's get to know our users better. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. It's going to go down. And they did it. And it's like, boom, that's what happened. It went down, right? And I'm sure, well, I won't be cynical. I'm sure they looked at that data. And then finally, there was a key feature that you used to not have to register for that we suddenly made you have to register for, and it made that shoot up to 90%. But the whole point here is, unless you're looking at the metrics, you're flying blind, right? Marketing and other teams are making changes. You're making changes all the time, and if you're not seeing what's going on, you could just drive off a cliff and not even know it. All right. So the next, this is kind of out of left field, but does anyone know what this is a photo of? What this is called? It's a very specific thing, and I wouldn't expect anybody to know it. I used to work on submarines. This is from a ship. So these are called gauges, like dials, they're called gauges because they're measuring stuff. And this is called a gauge board. It's just a board that has all the dials on it. And this is for the back of the ship, like a steam plant that drives the ship. And what I love about this is how I think about the metrics for your business, because it's all the key metric. Each key metric has a gauge or a dial. And you as the PM are looking at where are we at with all these, right? And these dials are like the thing, these wheels are like the levers you have at your disposal to try to make those gauges go where you want them to go. And so I like to think of each of those metrics from the equation of your business that you're trying to improve like a gauge. And what does a gauge have? Well, a gauge has a minimum possible value. In this case, this would be like 0 to 100, like a percentage. So 0 is a minimum. It has a max possible value. For a percentage metric, it's 100. And then it has a current value. I couldn't find one that wasn't at 0. So imagine the red arrow is where you're at, right? So there's a current value. And so as you're thinking about your metrics, it's important to think about those three things. What's the minimum? Where are we at today? What's the maximum? Because what we want to do out of all those metrics is identify the critical few metrics, right? Which ones are really going to make the difference? How much do we think we can move the needle from where we're at? And then using the formula equation of your business, we can calculate what the impact on revenue will be, right? Say we improve our registration conversion rate by 5%. Well, just multiplying it out, that should grow revenue by 5%, right? And then on the cost side, well, great. If we think we can improve that by 10%, how many resources is that going to take? How many developer weeks? How much time, money, things like that? And what you want to do is look across those metrics, across your gauge board, and say, which one do we think is going to offer the highest ROI, return on investment? And then you want to do a high-level ROI assessment. So ROI, we've got the return on the y-axis here, the value that's created, right? And that can be revenue. If we're optimizing revenue, these could be dollars here if you wanted. It's like if we had $1 million business and this idea was going to improve it 5%, right? Then we can go up and put 50K up there, right? As a real number. Or you can think about it more loosely, just qualitatively, like, hey, we think it's going to do this much, or how much customer value it's going to create. And then the investment is typically developer weeks, is the main thing that we're looking at here. And so, you want to basically plot your ideas that you have, your top ideas for that top metric on here. And you may have two ideas that, again, roughly deliver the same value. I'm not saying this is to like the second decimal point or anything like that. But hey, these two ideas deliver roughly the same value. But idea B takes twice as long as idea A. So idea A has twice the ROI of idea B, and we would do that one first. Often you get ideas that have similar ROIs, but different sizes. So like here, idea C is 2 for 2. Idea D is 4 for 4. When you've got those scenarios, I usually advise to go for the smaller scope idea. Scope estimation error is asymmetric. It's not like, this. If I said, hey, I'll get that to you in an hour, I'm not going to slip a month on that deadline. But if I say, yeah, I'll get you that feature in 6 months, it could go to 8, 9, 10, right? So that's asymmetric scope. The other thing is this will get in the marketplace sooner, so we'll get the benefit sooner in our revenue or product market fit, and we'll get the learning about from the market sooner. So that's that. There are obviously bad ideas out there. Nobody tries to do these on purpose. Usually what you realize is the investment as you're working and working and working and working and working, and you're hoping that it's going to be like that, but you launch it and you realize, geez, we thought it was going to create all this value, but it didn't, right? And that's usually because a lot of times it's some internal company idea. It's a solution looking for a problem. It's not based on like validating with customers that it meets a need. And we as product people, what we want to do is come up with these high ROI ideas that haven't been thought of yet, right? That create a lot of value for a little less, for not much effort. And what we want to do, I think good product people are able to work very closely with their engineering counterparts. There's always 80-20 at play with any feature, right? You don't need to build the whole kit and caboodle. You can find ways to shave off the less valuable parts and achieve the value, but with a little less effort. And again, once you run this high-level analysis, then you can kind of pick your ideas in order, and eventually, like I said, you get diminishing returns, but that's the idea. And to kind of simplify it, I've found in my experience, there's really 3 main ROI situations that you find yourself in for a given metric. The first is what I call a good ROI, right? And the way I express this is you've got your return here and your investment here, and this curve represents if you executed the best ideas that you could go after, what return would you expect to see, right? So with a little bit of investment, we can get a lot of return. That's a good ROI curve. There's also a bad ROI curve, where we're up here now, and it's just going to take, even with a lot of investment, we're not going to get a gig gain on return, right? This is good and bad. And there's a third category that isn't incredibly common, but you do find it. And it looks like this, where basically, with a little bit of investment, you can get a lot, like a big return, more so than in this case. And that's what I call a silver bullet metric. And again, they're not super common, but they definitely exist, especially in products or businesses where you haven't yet applied this lean product process to look at your analytics. There's always this low-hanging fruit stuff that if you analyze the situation just right, you can find the right lever that's going to have a big impact. All right, to close out, I want to share a case study of me applying this. So I was a head of product at Friendster back in the day. Anyone use Friendster? Yeah? All right, cool. So MySpace came and ate our lunch, and then Facebook came and ate their lunch. But we were the first social network, like the real social network out there. And when I joined, it was a post-Series A startup, 50 people. And everybody in the building's like, viral growth is important. New user acquisition through our existing users is really important. It's important. It's important. I'm like, that's great. What metrics do we have? It's like, none. I'm like, OK, great. So I believed that it was important. I said, great, let me go figure out what metrics we're going to do. So step 1, a lean product process, identify your metrics, right? So I said, great, let me create the viral loop to then figure out what metrics I should do. And the way it works is you have active users, and they invite their friends, and those are prospective users. They get an email. They either click on it or they don't. If they click on it, they get to your registration process. They either get through that and register or they don't. The ones that do become users, a certain percentage of which remain active, right? So this was the basic viral loop. And I said, great, let me put some metrics on here. And again, I went with ratio metrics, right? So of our users, what percentage are active? That was the key metric. Of our active users, what percentage were actually sending invites in a given time period, like within a month? That was the second key metric. There's a third one where when you invite your friends, you don't just invite one at a time. You can invite 1 if you want, or you can invite 10 if you want. So there was a second metric of invites per sender. On the email, there's obviously a click-through rate on the email. And then there was a registration conversion rate. So those 5 metrics basically were the metrics that I basically said these are the key metrics that we need to figure out. These are the ones we can improve. And you multiply them together and do your viral ratio. Pretend you're the head of product of Friendster back in the day, and you're here, and it's like, great, now which one should I go after? Which one should I focus on? Let's narrow it down. Let's narrow it down to just these 3. Percentage of users sending invites, invites sent per sender, and conversion rate. And I know you guys have very, very little information, but let's do a group vote. Who would focus on percentage of users sending invites? Who think that's the highest ROI improvement? Who would focus on invites per sender? Who would focus on registration conversion rate? All right, that one got the most. So the next step in the process, I kind of bait and switched you guys, was where's your baselines? So I didn't give you the baselines. Let's do the baselines. This is the baselines. This is a 15%. That's the power of a baseline. You see that aha that just went in your head? That's the power of knowing nothing else. You guys weren't at Friendster, but now you know where they were. 15%, 2.3, 85%. Why don't we revote? Who would focus on A as the highest ROI metric? Got a lot more hands. Who would focus on B? Who would focus on C? A lot more on A, a lot less on C. That's the power of just knowing just the baseline of where you're at, right? And why is that? It's basically a hack. It's the upside potential of a metric. Even if you know nothing else, you can say, what's the maximum we could possibly improve this thing? And so let's go through each of these. Registration conversion rate or process yield. It's a percentage. It goes from 0 to 100, right? That's the min and that's the max. Remember the gauge? Where are we at today? We're at 85. What's the max? If we had the best product UX team and dev team in the world, what's the max? The max we could do is 15 percentage points. Represented as a percentage of where we're at today, that's 18%, right? I'm not saying we could get it. You're just saying what can we theoretically maximally get? That's that. What about the second one? Percentage of users sending invitations. It's percentage as well. Min 0, max 100. Current value 15. How much headroom, how much upside potential do we have? Not saying we can get it. No, but what is it? 85%. If we express that as a percentage of where we're at today, 15%, that's a 570% max improvement. Out of those two, I'm going to pick the second one. You guys to pick the second one too once you have the value. What about the third one? Average number of invites, 10%. What's the minimum value? 0. What's the maximum value? Infinity. Next. How many people in the world? 7 billion. How many people on the internet? So people start to get excited, like infinity. Wow, we can do infinity. You know, it's like, well, not infinity, right? It's not a percentage. It's fundamentally different than the other metrics, right? So it usually goes infinity. Wait, there's 7 billion people in the world. Wait, how many are on the internet? And eventually you go, well, wait, how many friends do people really have? Like 200, 250, right? So, but we don't know. What we do know is we're at 2.3. Do we think there's a lot of headroom there or not much headroom? I think there's a lot of headroom, right? So it's like, I don't know what that's going to be, but if we could reverse engineer the numbers and see what would it have to be bigger than 570%, if the average, if we can get each person to do like 100, 150, 200 friends, it would be huge, right? So this sounds like it could be a silver bullet metric. We don't know yet, right? So is anyone feeling a sense of deja vu from something I said a little bit earlier? There's those three things, the three type of metrics, remember? There's the bad one. That's the registration process yield. We're already 85%, right? That's why that one's bad, basically. The good one, right? That's our percentage of users. We're only at 15%. There's a lot of upside there. And then we don't know yet, but invites, percenter, feels like it could be this like big silver bullet thing. So that's why we focus on that. The other reason we focus on that is because, trust me, we had tried to get people to invite their friends. It wasn't like we just hadn't tried. There are invite buttons all over. For whatever reason, only 15% of people decided to do it. So rather that would involve like changing user behavior, getting people that hadn't invited to invite. This one, we weren't trying to change their behavior. They're already inviting people. Let's just figure out how we can get them to invite more when they do it. So that was another reason we did that. So we said, great, that's the metric we're going to focus on. We went into the specific metric optimization loop. We brainstormed a bunch of ideas. For each idea, how much is it going to move the needle? How much is it going to cost, right? And this is back in 2004. So nowadays, address book importers are kind of common, but then there weren't. And so we decided an address book importer, because what I also didn't tell you is you had to type in each of your friends' email addresses. That's why it was 2.3. Right? You had to type them in. So we said, great, let's do an address book importer. We used the same maximum upside potential rationale because you had to build the importer by each email provider, Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo. Turns out at the time Yahoo was the most popular one, so we said, all right, let's do the Yahoo, because you had to do custom development work for each one. Let's MVP with Yahoo and see what happens. And the estimate from engineering was like 1 engineer, 1.5 weeks, right? And we've got the silver bullet opportunity. So what happened? So here's the number. So this is, again, average invite sent. So when somebody invites their friends, how many invites do they send? We're chugging along at 2.3. And this is a 7-day average, by the way. So we're chugging along, and this is when we rolled out the improvement. Again, week and a half engineering effort, and it more than doubled up to over 5, basically, right? And it took a little while because of the 7-day average. But so it turned out to be a silver bullet metric. Again, by carefully analyzing the situation and looking at the upside potential, we figured that out. So I was pretty psyched about that. And again, all we did is just follow the Lean analytic process again. Figure out what your metrics are for your business. Measure your baseline values. We just saw how important baseline values are. Evaluate the upside potential at the global level. Figure out which metric has the best opportunity. Then go into that loop and go around. So thanks a lot. We're going to do a question panel, I guess, in a little bit. But I'm happy to talk with you guys later. And I'll tweet the people that won the books. Thanks.
Okay.